Something we've talked about a lot this year is the possibility of Nintendo releasing some new kind of Switch. Now, when we've talked about this before, it's mostly been the idea that maybe they're working on some kind of Switch Pro with better graphics, better battery life, something that's just all in all more powerful. But a lot of rumors lately, and something a lot of people have been discussing, is that it actually looks like Nintendo might be working on something that's in the opposite direction, a cheaper, more affordable Switch Mini. Now, before we get to whether or not this is a good idea, let's break down what exactly a Switch Mini would entail. And I think the leading logic we need to use here is that Nintendo would want to make something that is more affordable. Now, of course, making a smaller Switch also just makes something that's more portable, but I don't think that's really the lead goal. I think the lead idea is to make something that's going to be lower in price tag for a lot of people, because I think a big sales strength that Nintendo has in the past is making affordable system options like the DS line and even the original Wii. So what would it take to make a cheaper Switch, something that's maybe in the $150 to $180 region? Well, of course, making the smaller size results in a smaller screen, but I think there also has to be the focus on the idea of making something that is overall weaker than a Switch. Now, I don't mean that they should make a system that is weaker, not going to run games as well, but instead they make a system that is only able to run games as we know them in portable mode. There's a lot of power the Switch isn't using when it's portable, and it saves for when it's in docked mode. So if they want to make a dedicated, smaller handheld version, certainly a way to cut down on cost is make something that's just strong enough to run what we normally see in portable mode. Another big change would of course be moving away from traditional wireless Joy-Cons, but instead just have traditional controls be part of the overall unit. Now, of course, you could still use other Joy-Cons with this conceptual system. If you bought some other ones or you already had a Switch, you could still use them with it, but there would just already be ones attached to the system that you're not having to pay extra to get wireless functionality or any of that kind of stuff. Now, the upside of this is, once again, makes it cheaper, and it could afford them certain choices they can't get away with on Joy-Cons, like having a D-pad on this side. The downside is, if you don't end up buying any other Joy-Cons or anything, you do limit some of the control options in certain games. A lot of them do rely on some motion controls, and while it'll still make sense for some, like being able to aim a weapon using the tilting function on the system itself, any game that requires more nuanced motion controls just wouldn't really work here. These two major possible changes open up a lot of questions about what other kind of features could be added or removed from the system. For instance, like I said, if the Joy-Cons are permanently attached, why not have a D-pad? And if it's designed to be a smaller portable system, it might be designed only for handheld mode in mind, and therefore might not even have a kickstand, which I'm kind of okay with. The most interesting question, though, is what happens to the Switch's main feature, its namesake, the fact that it switches between portable and TV modes. Because so far, while talking about this possible Switch Mini, we've really been thinking about it in terms of just being a dedicated handheld. But does it actually have to remove the ability to connect to a TV? I mean, obviously there would be certain limitations, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to have the feature removed entirely. Now, the couple problems it could have are pretty obvious. First off, if it is a smaller Switch in design, it probably wouldn't be able to fit in current Nintendo Switch docks. After all, if it's a smaller design, everything's gonna be brought more in, the sticks and buttons are gonna get in the way. Of course, they could maybe just have a giant gap between the screen and controls, but then that would just look bizarre and maybe not the best idea. The other issue is, once again, if they weaken the system to where it only really supports the quality and performance level that we see in handheld mode, it's not going to actually give us that TV mode performance, which, depending on the game, is either not that big of a deal or absolutely awful. The obvious issue there, of course, is that we're not going to get a very good resolution on a big screen TV. If you're taking something that is 720 and just upscaling it to a modern television, it doesn't always look very pretty, and not even all games achieve 720p resolution when in portable mode on the Switch. Titles like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 would just look, honestly, terrible. And this is a problem we've seen other companies experiment with. For instance, when PlayStation was messing around with the PS Vita, one of the products they released was the PlayStation TV, a very small console that would allow you to play your Vita games on a television. At the exact same video quality though, and you're seeing these games that look great on a Vita screen all of a sudden upscaled to a large screen TV, and it just doesn't translate at all. And in the case of the Switch, resolution isn't the only problem. There are some games that also just run at a worse frame rate when in handheld mode, and so if you're getting both that reduced resolution and worse frame rate on a big screen TV, it kind of hurts. At the same time though, is it really the Switch if it can't switch at all? I mean, is the name Switch Mini even appropriate? Should Nintendo come up with something else, including such golden titles that have been suggested by people around here at the office as The Stuck, because it's only in portable mode, or the new Nintendo DS, doesn't switch? And then there's another possible issue with the Switch Mini that I think Nintendo needs to figure out, which is how they handle their account management. Now, for a lot of people, you're obviously either going to stick with your regular Switch, or maybe you pick up the Switch Mini because you've been waiting for something that's a cheaper alternative, or maybe you're getting it for a kid or something. But there's going to be that small percentage of people who I think would be interested in the idea of owning a regular Switch that they keep docked and use as a home TV console, and then maybe buy a Switch Mini to have a more portable option when they're on the go. The thing is, with how Nintendo handles accounts on Switches right now, you run into some problems when you do that. See, currently you can attach a single Nintendo account to multiple Switches, but only one Switch can be the primary Switch, which opens up certain limitations on the other Switches. Namely, if you want to play a game that you own digitally, you have to be connected to the internet initially to be able to make sure that, yes, you own this game and you can use it. And in the case of something you want to share with family members, only the primary account will allow other users to play games that you own digitally. So in the potential situation that you own both a regular Switch you use at home and a Switch Mini that you use on the go, which of those would you actually want to have be the primary account? Because in the case of having it on the home TV, great, other people can use it and they can play whatever games you own digitally, but in the case of the one you have on handheld, you can't actually play any of your digital games if there's no internet, which kind of defeats the purpose of a portable system. On the other hand, if you have it be your primary account on the portable one, well, now only you can actually play games on your home Switch unless other people are buying their own games separately, but hey, your portable at least has all your games now. There's also the issue of how fluid it would be constantly switching between these two systems, because if you want to make use of Nintendo Switch cloud saves, well, you have to be a Nintendo Switch Online member, which makes sense, but then there's also the issue of how those saves are handled. See, you can have it automatically back up your saves on your primary account, but on any other account, you need to download or upload the saves manually. So every single time you want to go from one Switch to another, you need to make sure you're on the right save file, you have to back it up. If you haven't already, you might have to download it. It just ends up throwing a wrench in the whole thing. It's kind of a similar issue that Sony has with PlayStation 4s, but obviously you're not constantly switching between them because it's like different home units. In this case, it's actually on the go or at home. Despite these issues that I think Nintendo is going to need to address if this Nintendo Switch Mini is real, I do think the concept is a really, really good idea, and it's something that makes a lot of sense for Nintendo. Now, don't get me wrong, a Switch Pro also sounds really cool, and that is something that I would make use of. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's the right call for Nintendo as far as actually tapping into a larger audience. Yes, the Switch has already been selling well, and I'm sure there are those people out there that are saying, I don't want to buy one yet until they make one that supports 4K or has smaller bezels or better battery life, whatever. Yes, all valid things that I think there are people out there that want, but ultimately would result in a more expensive to produce system for a smaller number of people out there. I think something that Nintendo is more interested in trying to recapture is kids. Sure, the Switch is probably already sold to a lot of different families, but in a lot of cases it's probably being treated as something that's used for the whole family. People need to take turns, it's something that's mainly just used on the TV, so on and so forth. As opposed to something like the DS where for 120 bucks, here's a small, cheaper personal handheld that one kid can have. And so if they made a smaller, affordable Switch that was sitting in that same price range, that opens up a lot of potential sales they currently are not seeing. It also allows Nintendo to do things with a cheaper system that they aren't doing with the Switch currently. For instance, color variety. The Nintendo Switch has a lot of different Joy-Con color options, and they do have different bundles for that, but as far as the main Switch body itself goes, it is a basic plain black system. Even with special edition systems, it's primarily just a black main body. Whereas the Switch Mini could tap into stuff they've traditionally done with the Game Boy and DS line, where we see a whole bunch of different colors. I mean, imagine if all the Joy-Con colors we have right now turned into full handheld systems. That'd be really cool. Whether or not any of this is true, we honestly don't know. It's been a lot of rumors, but Nintendo has been very, very tight-lipped on it and has kind of given the standard response of like, we have nothing to talk about regarding anything we're releasing this year. Now, it's very possible that they just have no new system this year at all, and we've all just been grasping at a bunch of straws. But if they do have a new system in the works, I think a Mini is much more likely than a Pro.